Are people returning AMD's 7900 XTX and finally going for an RTX 4080? Well, look at this guy here who posted yesterday. He said he got a reference XTX and despite all the issues, debunked rumors, etc., he was going to hold on to it. He heard that AMD officially said the coolers might be bad on some of our units, so you're going to get irregularly bad hotspot temperatures. His arrived in the mail yesterday. Building his PC, he says if he has a defective cooler, he's going to send it right back and buy the 4080. And he wasn't the only one. Somebody else said, just got a 7900 XTX reference card today. Complete dog, and I'm going to bleep that out. Returned it an hour later. How do they put a triple fan cooler on a GPU and it still overheats right out of the box? Pathetic. I'll pay for the 4080, he says. I then followed up and actually asked him what temperatures in games to see what exactly was going on. He said, just threw on Godfall and was at 105 to 106 junction at roughly 2500 RPM. Firestrike was hitting 110 with 3000 RPM fan. Temp spiked so fast on the junction and the fan ramped up. So he kind of probably knows what he's talking about. He's testing it. He knows what the RPM is. He knows what junction temperature is. So he's somebody who got the card and wasn't happy with it at all. I mean, what about my perspective? I got a 7900 XTX, that Red Devil limited edition. And while the frames were pretty high, I mean, listen to this, the coil whine, it was like a party was going on with the GPU and silence was not invited. Listen to this. Here we're running at 1440p, the 7900 XTX. Listen to that coil whine. That is some crazy coil whine. You can hear it even over the fans. But yeah, so far, let's see. The GPU's staying pretty cool, only 49C. Frames per second seem pretty high. This is on extreme. We'll see what the average is. And if you like GPU videos, remember to subscribe and smash that like button so we reach 50,000 subscribers soon. Yes, in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, I was able to reach almost the same numbers as a 4090, but the noise was really kind of unbearable. On my 4090, it's virtually silent. Now, let me just stop right here and say I like AMD GPUs. I don't want people to think that I'm just dogging on the 7900 XTX and saying go buy a 4080. The last few days, a couple things did make me, for the first time, maybe recommend a 4080 under very specific conditions. Like there was that recent Best Buy coupon code where you can get 10% off. Of course, no affiliation with me whatsoever. A whole bunch of people actually bought it because at like $1079, the 4080 makes a lot more sense. And then it becomes almost the price of a 7900 XTX, which you can't really buy that easily. Now, let's kind of break it down between the 7900 XTX and the 4080. You can find a 4080 very easy right now at Best Buy. It's been in stock for like 3 or 4 days, and I'm even talking about the Founders Edition. I have it in my system right back here. The Founders Edition actually is a great GPU. It has some of the best thermals. The cooler is really over-engineered. It's actually meant for like a 4090. Founders Edition, great PCB. It's one of the best ones, and it's been in stock at Best Buy consistently now. Like anybody's been able to get it. You could look at my last few videos. There have been a lot of people that bought it and jumped on it because it is $1079. What other high-end GPU can you currently buy for that price? Now, AMD, when they announced the 7900 XTX, the whole thing was supposed to be really good performance and cheaper than the 4080. So what exactly happened? When the GPU came out, it seemed like all of that hype kind of disappeared a little bit. In my opinion, I mean, the GPUs, for the most part, they kind of perform close enough. Like, I know it didn't really hit AMD's sort of efficiency that they were talking about. That all got thrown out the window. A lot of the performance data wasn't necessarily as much as AMD hyped up when actual games were tested. But, I mean, there are some games that do lean more towards AMD, like the newest one, Call of Duty, the Modern Warfare 2. That one, even with the 6900 XT, typically does well on AMD hardware. So if that's a game that you like playing, even I was playing it the other day, a lot of fun, you're going to get a lot of frames on something like a 7900 XT and an XTX. Let's not forget the XT as well. At $899, it's consistently in stock, even more than the 4080, and people really sort of complain about it because of that price to performance. But somebody brought up a good point. Everybody tells you to buy the 7900 XTX, right? At $100 more, it makes complete sense on paper. But what if you walk into Micro Center, or you look at Best Buy, you look at Newegg in Europe, you walk into whatever local store you have or online marketplace, you see the only GPU you can buy is either a 4080 at hundreds of dollars more or a 7900 XT. You're not doing a $100 comparison between the XTX because the XTX isn't there. If both were sitting on the shelf, then you can make the argument, of course, $100 more, you're going to get a lot more performance. But in the real world, either you get lucky and get the XTX, or you wait maybe a few weeks or a few months until it's more readily available, or the only other GPU you're going to get are going to be the XT and maybe the 4080, that maybe 1079 if you're lucky enough to get that coupon code. Maybe it's an interesting GPU if that's around your budget that you want to spend, around that $1,000 mark, give or take. Now, if that coupon code, I believe it also works on the XT if you get it from Best Buy, so then you're talking about almost $800 for the XT. That's probably not really that bad, since that GPU overall kind of beats like a 3090 Ti and some of the higher end stuff from Nvidia from last generation, and that's a pretty decent price. The only thing you're really going to be missing out with AMD in terms of like raw performance is going to be when it comes to ray tracing. Now, my opinion, I've said this a few times, if you're buying a GPU around $1,000 or more, part of it is because you want to run things on ultra, maybe like extreme. Some games have that now. You want all of the performance and all of the eye candy. Isn't that true? And unfortunately, ray tracing, or fortunately, depending which side you're looking at it from, ray tracing, path tracing, those things are part of having the best visual experience on a game. Does it always make sense for the performance penalty that you get? No, it doesn't. Sometimes, like look at even Cyberpunk, you play it at 4K, even on a 4090, you're going to be getting under 60 frames per second. You're going to be getting like 40 something frames per second. As soon as you turn on, and that's with ray tracing, as soon as you turn on DLSS, then you're going to be getting 80 plus or whatever it is. So you have to use those type of technologies, and AMD has it as well, FSR, even though currently DLSS is still a bit superior, especially DLSS 3 in games that use it. A good example is Flight Simulator 2020. Let's say if I'm running on an ultra wide, like the highest settings, I was getting maybe 70 frames per second, which is, it's acceptable. It's nothing stellar, and that's on the 4090. But as soon as I turned on DLSS 3.0, that pretty much doubled to like 140 to 150 frames per second, and I couldn't really tell any degradation in the quality or anything like that. It really looked pretty much as good at 70 frames natively, but I was getting many higher frames because of that AI frame generation technology that kind of goes hand in hand with Nvidia's new DLSS 3.0. Of course, you're going to get some more latency thrown in there. That's why Nvidia likes to also pair that with like Nvidia, the reflex. That's why Nvidia often pairs it with that reflex technology, so that way the latency kind of goes down a bit. You still have that frame generation. It's like three things working together, or else it would just be like DLSS 2.0 or something like FSR, which does it a little bit differently, but the result is it upscales things, so it looks like it's doing a lot better without giving you that graphical penalty, and allows you to do things like ray tracing and different things like that. Has an advantage on that side, no doubt about it, compared to even the XTX, which typically will do ray tracing more on par with Nvidia's last generation, like 3090. That's about what an XTX does in terms of ray tracing. It's not bad. I mean, people were loving ray tracing on the 3090. It's really one of the first generations that really made ray tracing something that was going to be a little bit more accepted, even though I understand it's not. Some people think it's not worth it. It's too much of a, Nvidia hype word to get them to get more of an advantage. But at the end of the day, RTX 4000 has more powerful hardware to take advantage of ray tracing as it does with, DLSS 3.0. And if that's an unfair advantage or not, it's something that Nvidia is pushing, and it does make for a better gaming experience, which at the end of the day is really what matters. And coming back to that XTX versus 4080 argument, one of the biggest advantages to having an XTX or one of those AMD GPUs, it has to be the pricing. The pricing is where AMD is going to differentiate it from Nvidia, because for the most part, Nvidia has the better hardware, like we just spoke about with ray tracing and DLSS. AMD has its own versions of, FSR. It has its own technologies there, so it's not like it's zero, but typically they're not going to be as maybe appreciated as on the Nvidia side. Because of the price difference, people will kind of, they'll be okay with a few compromises on the AMD side, such as not as good ray tracing, not DLSS. They'll be okay with those things. When other things start to pile in there, maybe the drivers aren't as stable. Maybe there are some issues with the actual hardware, like the coolers aren't designed as well. Maybe a lot of coil whine, more than maybe you would find on an Nvidia GPU, like the original commenters mentioned. Those things start to kind of skew it, and people are like, you know what? Maybe they rather pay for a 4080, which is going to have a perceived notion of perhaps better quality, not always better performance depending on the use case, but always, for the most part, better drivers and better quality. That's at least how people view Nvidia anyway. So if the 4080 price, like with that discount, this was a great experiment. If the 4080 price actually comes down a little bit, it came down like $120, around $1079, making it basically the price of an AIB 7900 XTX, or only $80 above what the reference model would cost at $999. That makes people think that's not enough of a difference to risk it with the XTX. Not saying XTX is bad at all. It just has more risk associated with it. Nvidia has more provable and objective advantages over AMD. So that's the way that I can break it down in sort of a non-biased way. I like AMD GPUs. I like Nvidia GPUs, but Nvidia GPUs are overall better. They're more expensive, yes, but they're also better. Look at the 4090. Nothing's going to touch it, at least not now. That's coming out soon. So sometimes we have to separate that from the financial practices or market practices of these companies, if you will. But at the end of the day, it seems like a lot of people are kind of going back to the 4080 anyway, because maybe the hype around AMD's GPU wasn't quite what they expected. Some people do have experience with high-end AMD, like 6900 XTs and those RX 6000 GPUs. They certainly sold pretty well, but it's nothing like on the Nvidia side with RTX 3000, which dominates 80% or more of the market. So when people try AMD for the first time, maybe it's somebody's first 7900 XTX high-end AMD experience, they may be immediately thrown off by things that are different from Nvidia and maybe not want to give it the chance that maybe it deserves. Maybe in a few months, those GPUs will be more stable, but right now, it looks like the battle between the 4080 and the XTX are definitely heating up, and the 4080 is probably winning. A lot more are available. Nvidia is definitely flooding the market with them, so more people are probably willing to buy it, even with that sort of 10% discount. All right, guys, so let me know what you think about this competition between these two GPUs. Which one would you choose? Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.